The Cursed Gold, The Tale of Abina and the Golden Stone Part 1, The Discovery. In the small Ghanaian village of Obosomes, deep in the eastern region, lived a young woman named Abina Cancer. She was poor. Very poor. Her clothes were always torn, her stomach always empty, and her tiny mud house was barely standing. The villagers often mocked her. "Look at Abina, the girl with no future," they would say. "She will die in poverty, just like her mother." Abina never responded. She worked hard every day, fetching firewood, helping farmers on their lands, and selling water at the market. But no matter how much she worked, her life never changed. One day, she decided to go into the forbidden forest, a place feared by all. The elders warned that the forest was home to dark spirits, but Abina was desperate. She needed to find something, anything, to change her life. As she walked deeper into the forest, the air became thicker, heavier. The trees stood tall and twisted, their roots stretching like snakes across the ground. Then, she saw it. A golden stone, half buried in the earth, glowing faintly in the dim light. Her heart pounded. Gold, real gold. With shaking hands, she picked it up. The stone was smooth and warm, pulsing like a heartbeat. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, a cold whisper brushed against her ear. "Take it, but know the cost." Abina froze. She spun around. No one was there. A shiver ran down her spine, but she tightened her grip on the stone and ran out of the forest. She didn't care about spirits or curses. She had found gold, and her suffering was over. Or so she thought. Part 2, Abina's wealth. Abina rushed to the village gold merchant and showed him the stone. His eyes widened in shock. "This is no ordinary gold. It is pure. It is magical." He weighed it, examined it, and after a long silence, he looked up at her. "I will buy this from you for 100 bags of gold coins." Abina almost collapsed. She had never seen even one gold coin before, now she was being offered hundreds. With the money, she transformed her life. She built the biggest house in the village. She wore the finest silk from faraway lands. She ate food fit for a queen. The villagers who once mocked her now worshipped her. Men who once ignored her now begged to marry her. Abina had everything. But deep inside, something felt wrong. Every night, she had the same dream. A woman, dressed in black, with hollow eyes and a twisted smile, stood in the shadows. "You took what was not yours, now, you must pay the price." Abina always woke up screaming. She told herself it was nothing. Just a dream. But soon, the nightmares became real. It started with the gold merchant. One evening, he was found in his shop, his body turned to solid gold. His wife screamed, his children wailed, and the entire village gathered in fear. "What kind of magic is this?" Abina stood among the crowd, shaking. "No, it can't be." That night, she had another dream. The woman in black appeared again, her eyes glowing red. "One life for your fortune. More will follow." Abina woke up in a cold sweat. The next day, the village chief fell dead. His body turned to gold. Then, a rich farmer. Then, a wealthy trader. One by one, those who had touched her gold suffered the same fate. Panic spread through the village. "This is witchcraft. Abina's wealth is cursed." The same villagers who once worshipped her now feared her. And Abina, too, began to fear herself. She rushed back to the forest, clutching her remaining gold. She screamed into the darkness, "I don't want it anymore. Take it back." The trees whispered. The wind howled. And then, she saw her. The woman in black. Her twisted smile grew wider. "You cannot return what is already yours." Abina fell to the ground, weeping. Her wealth was not a blessing. It was a curse. and she could not escape it. Part 4, the final horror. Abina tried to run. She fled the village, hoping to leave the curse behind. But no matter where she went, death followed. Every person who accepted her gold, every merchant who took her money, they all turned to gold. Her hands became deadly. Her wealth became a weapon. She could no longer eat. No one would sell her food. She could no longer drink. No one would give her water. She became a wanderer, feared by all. Her once beautiful skin became pale and cracked, like dry gold left in the sun. Her body grew weak. Her golden palace became an empty prison. And then, one evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Abina looked at herself in the river. Her reflection was no longer human. Her eyes glowed gold. Her skin shimmered unnaturally. She gasped. Her own curse had reached her. With one last breath, Abina collapsed onto the ground. Her body stiffened. Her heartbeat slowed. And in the morning, when the villagers found her, she was nothing but a golden statue. A reminder of what happens when greed meets the wrath of the spirits. Part 5, the return of the cursed gold. The villagers of Obosome stood in silence, staring at the golden statue that was once Abinankansa. Her lifeless golden face was frozen in a look of terror, her fingers stretched out as if reaching for help. No one dared to touch her. They whispered among themselves, "This is the work of the spirits. She stole from the forbidden forest. This is what happens when greed blinds the heart." The chief priest, an old man with white painted skin and blood-red beads, stepped forward. He lifted his staff and chanted in a deep, echoing voice, "The curse is not over." The villagers gasped. "What do you mean, Nana?" one woman asked. The priest's old eyes gleamed in the fading sunlight. "The gold she took from the forest was not ordinary," he said. "It is the heart of a powerful spirit. That spirit is angry. It will not rest until the gold is returned, or until more lives are taken." A cold wind swept through the village, making everyone shudder. The people knew what had to be done. The golden statue of Abina must be taken back to the forbidden forest. But who would dare take it? The forest was a place of shadows and whispers. A place where people entered but never returned. Part 6, the curse spreads. That night, the golden statue of Abina was placed in the center of the village. The villagers planned to carry it back to the forest in the morning. But something strange happened. By dawn, the statue was gone. In its place lay a pile of golden dust, glistening in the morning sun. The people panicked. "Where is the statue? Who touched it? What is happening?" Then, the first death occurred. Kwame, the strongest warrior in the village, was found in his hut, his entire body turned to solid gold. His wife screamed. His children ran away in terror. Then, the next day, another person turned to gold. And if you listen closely at night, deep in the heart of the trees, you can still hear the whispers of Abina, trapped between words, forever paying the price of her greed. Part 8, the spirits revenge. The villagers of Obosomes thought the nightmare was over. They believed that after Abina's grandmother sacrificed herself, the cursed gold had returned to the spirit, and peace had been restored. But they were wrong. That very night, a deep thunder rumbled in the sky, though no clouds could be seen. The air became thick, as if the village itself was struggling to breathe. Then, the ground shook. From the forbidden forest, a woman's scream tore through the air, long, sharp, and filled with agony. The villagers froze in terror. "Did you hear that? The spirits, they are still angry." The chief priest rushed to the shrine and threw sacred white powder into the fire. The flames rose high, turning from red to dark blue. A whispering voice filled the air, "You think you can end this? You think you can take from me and walk away?" The priest's hands shook. He had never heard the spirits this angry before. Then, a golden mist began to rise from the ground. First, it was slow. Then, it spread quickly, slithering like a snake, entering the houses. Within moments, people began to scream. Their feet turned to gold. Their fingers stiffened. Their faces froze in terror. One by one, they fell to the ground, their bodies completely transformed into golden statues. The curse had not ended. It had only begun. Part 9. The survivors escaped by morning. More than half the village was gone, turned into lifeless golden figures. The surviving villagers gathered at the chief priest's hut, their voices trembling. What do we do now? The spirits won't stop until we are all dead. The priest, his face covered in sweat, closed his eyes. He knew what had to be done. We must leave. The villagers gasped. Leave Obosomes. The priest nodded. This land is no longer ours. The spirits have claimed it. Some refuse to go. This is our home. Our ancestors built this land. But as they argued, another horrifying sound filled the air. Crack! 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 The golden statues of the dead began to move. Their golden arms twitched. Their hollow eyes glowed. Then, they turned their heads toward the living. And started to walk. The villagers did not wait. They ran. Women carried their babies. Men grabbed whatever they could. The elders hobbled as fast as their weak legs could take them. The golden dead followed, their steps slow but relentless, never stopping. By the time the survivors reached the river, only a handful remained. They crossed the water, panting, shaking, too afraid to look back. But one young girl, Akojoa, could not help herself. She turned her head, and saw the golden statue standing at the edge of the river, staring with empty, glowing eyes. They did not cross. They simply stood there, watching. Waiting. The priest whispered in fear, they are trapped in the village. But one day, someone foolish will return, and the curse will begin again. The survivors built a new village, far away. They never spoke of Obosomes again. And to this day, deep in the forest, the cursed village still stands, filled with golden statues, waiting for the next greedy soul to set them free. For many years, no one dared to speak of Obosomes, the cursed village of gold. The survivors who built a new home far away taught their children one important rule: never go back. But as time passed, the story became a myth. And when something becomes a myth, people start to doubt if it was ever real. The greedy stranger one day, a young hunter named Kojo Mensah, arrived in the new village. He was not from there, he was a stranger, passing through in search of adventure and fortune. One evening, as he drank palm wine with the village elders, he overheard them whispering about a forbidden place. The cursed village, the golden statues. Kojo's ears perked up. Golden statues, he asked. The elders fell silent. But Kojo, curious and hungry for riches, pressed on. Are you telling me that somewhere in the forest, there is a whole village filled with gold? The elders warned him. It is not ordinary gold. It is cursed. But Kojo laughed. Curses are for fools. If this village is filled with gold, why leave it to rot in the forest? I will go and take what I need. The people begged him to let the past stay buried. But Kojo was blinded by greed. That very night, while the villagers slept, he quietly slipped into the forest, following the old, forgotten path to Obosomes. They returned to the cursed village after hours of walking. Kojo finally saw it, the abandoned village, covered in vines, with dozens of golden statues standing in silence. His heart raced with excitement. Look at this wealth, he whispered. He stepped forward, brushing dust off one of the golden faces. The statue's empty eyes stared back at him. Kojo shivered. But the gold was too tempting. He pulled out his knife and began chipping pieces from the golden arms, legs, and chest of the statues. He laughed as the gold fell into his hands. Cursed! Huh! This is my fortune. Then, the wind stopped. The air became heavy, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Kojo froze. Something felt wrong. He slowly turned, and gasped. The statues had moved. Their heads, once frozen, were now turned toward him. Their hollow, golden eyes glowed in the darkness. A sharp whisper filled the air, "You took from us." Kojo stumbled backward, his heart pounding. Who said that? The whisper came again. "You took from us, and now, you will join us." Then, the statues moved. Their stiff, golden arms cracked and twisted, their legs shifted, their heads tilted unnaturally. Kojo screamed. He turned to run. But the moment he took a step, his feet became gold. He collapsed, watching in horror as the gold spread up his legs, reaching his chest, his arms, his fingers. "No. No, please. Someone help me." His cries echoed through the empty village. But there was no one to hear him. His mouth froze open. His eyes turned lifeless. And just like that, Kojo Mensah, the greedy fool, became one of them. A new golden statue in the cursed village of Obosomes. Waiting for the next fool to come. The warning that night, the villagers heard a scream echoing from the forest. They knew exactly what had happened. No one spoke of it. No one mourned Kojo. They only added one more rule to their warnings: if a stranger comes asking about the cursed village, do not stop him. Let the spirits teach him their lesson. And so, the legend continued, waiting for the next greedy soul who refused to listen.